Hello viewers, Will Undulder from the Huddle here at ICE Barcelona 2026 with the chair of the ANJ, Isabelle Falque-Pierrotin. Isabelle, thank you very much for joining us today. My first question I wanted to ask you is, looking back on the year just passed in 2025, what do you feel were France's biggest regulatory successes that year and then things to improve on in 2026?
Wow, this is a very difficult question to start with. Let's say that we are, in a way, to ask the operators to change their economic model. We've asked them in 2024, within 3 years, to have a less intensive and less focused on excessive gamblers model. So we are in between, the process. And the first results are quite interesting and quite satisfactory. We're not there already. And so this is probably our biggest challenge, because as you may know, the population of a problematic gambler in France is quite important, because it's roughly 1.2 million people. And so we have developed several tools to help the economic actors to start the shift of their economic model. And the last tool we are about to complete is an algorithm which would be a sort of reference of the possibility to identify excessive gamblers. And so, this is one of our major challenges.
And I know you've discussed there having a few tools that you're in development to help operators achieve this goal. Especially sports betting operators following the tax raise to nearly 60% last year. How do you expect to assist them further in this challenge of ensuring that they tackle this population of unprotected or problem gamblers whilst retaining compliance and innovation within that sort of that more difficult environment of having a higher tax bracket?
As you may know, tax rate is not in the responsibility of the ING. So we have pointed out the rise of tax rates to the government in saying that it was probably a huge difficulty, especially for the smaller operators. And so we are very keen to keep the balance between big and smaller operators. And but still, even with such a high rate, the sports betting market is still very active. In 2025, the online sports market is about 8% growth. So it's not that bad.
And shifting focus towards online casino, I know a lot of us from outside of the market and probably also within the market are still waiting for any updates following the announcement that it could be regulated imminently. Can you give us any insight into anything that may be happening, to your knowledge, behind closed doors, or any kind of progression in the potential regulation there at all?
Well, when you are at ICE, you see that online casinos are one of the major segments of the gambling offer. In France, it's not allowed. The problem we have in France is the lack of political leader on such an issue, because of the political instability in the last year, I would say. So I don't have any insights, I'm afraid. And what we just said is that such a move is a strategic move for the balance of the French market, because it's not a sort of a niche opening market. It is a huge decision, an important decision. And if it was to be so, we said that it should be probably rather strictly regulated, because the prevalence rate of such an offer is quite high.
Are there any particular areas of that regulation which you think would be fundamentally paramount to retain a healthy, thriving and protected online casino market in France, such as advertising, or any specific areas that you would like to see regulated more strictly should the regulation come to pass?
In fact, if the regulation was to pass for online casinos, we advise the government to have a strict advertising possibilities for such an offer, to have also probably stricter protection for young adults, 18 to 25, because they could be very well attracted by this new offer. When you see here the online casinos with all the innovation in terms of sounds, images, and formats, you realize that it could be very attractive for young people. So advertising should be, and also probably limits of stakes.
As a regulator, I think something that I've heard mentioned across the sort of industry more so now is that there's a oftentimes similarities between games that children might play, where they would earn fictitious coins or certain things like that as at a young age, and then moving forwards into the gameplay mechanics of online casinos specifically that are very similar to those kinds of games. Is that a challenge that you have also noticed in your position, and how could you ever hope to sort of tackle that kind of problem from a regulator's perspective?
This is a very good question. In fact, a remark. In fact, there is a continuity of use between young people and adults.
Yeah.
And what we see in France is that you have some games like the scratch card games that are entrance game and I would say introductory games to the gambling world, to the young people.
Yeah.
And I would say we're very vigilant on that because it gives the impression that games is natural, that games belongs to the everyday life, and that there's no particular risk even of lottery games and scratch cards, which is not the case because we know we have a study done with the Canadian partnership on scratch cards above €5. It says that these type of games are rather addictive. So we are quite keen to ask the advertising campaign not to use figures and stories from the kids' world in order not to give the impression that, even if it's forbidden to kids, in fact, kids are in the game too.
Just my final question. I know you mentioned there something about partnerships, and we spoke about ICE. From a regulator's perspective, again, what kind of goals do you come into a show like ICE with? How do you hope to reflect on the show once it's concluded? And what are you looking to achieve here as A&J this year?
I think what is important here is to feel the vibes, to see where the international market is going. And when you see here, you see really emerging, I feel, emerging some kind of international market, really, with suppliers, technical suppliers working in 50 different countries. And so I would say the regulators, they have to have this global perspective and not to copy from each other, but to be able to take the best out of certain territories. So no, it's very useful. But maybe there is a last remark I wanted to point is the innovation. In France, on the French market, we're going to have an important step, which is the opening of the market, I'm sorry, but the name is quite tricky, market of monetizable digital objects,
Okay.
NFT.
Yes.
And so it's going to open probably around March. And the ANG is going to be the regulator of such an experimental opening. And so I think it's quite a challenge for the regulator and for the French law, because it shows the possibility to integrate new types of games and see whether we're able to have inspiration from the gambling industry, the gambling regulation. So it's interesting.
Well, Isabelle, thank you very much for joining us. And yeah, thank you for your time. Enjoy the rest of the show.